No more struggle, no more strife. With my faith I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God.
Yay, that's wonderful. And now, I would like to introduce to those of you who do not know, Reverend Don Seiler. Do you want to talk about R.A.I.N?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Let's talk about it.
He's going to talk to us about R.A.I.N as if we haven't had any recently.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Some of you know me. I was going to say I see some old faces out there, but I didn't want to say it that way, and so... Because some of you are probably looking and say, what the hell happened to him? I think it's been a few years since I saw you guys, and for the first time I saw many of you, golly gee, I think I might have still been in my 50s. And now I just started my 8th decade in March. Yeah, and that's going to be part of what we're going to talk about today. But I'll just share briefly. My wife and I moved from Houston. We had both attended Unity of Houston, and we moved to Fredericksburg. Had some acreage, big house, orchard. And then my wife lost her job and had to start driving to San Antonio, and that was just too far to drive. So we picked New Braunfels. I was flying helicopters in San Marcos, and we decided to buy a smaller house here. It was a place for us to just be on the weekdays, and then we would go back to our home in Fredericksburg. And then for some reason, I looked up Unity, and here was Unity Church. Karen Tudor, who, by the way, the last wedding she performed at Unity of Houston in 2001 was my wife and I. And so we would go to Fredericksburg on Friday night, mow grass, and my wife, for some reason, wanted the entire fence line of 10 acres weed eated. So it was the whole hill country that I did weed eating on. And it felt that way. And so we would work all day on Saturday and get up on Sunday and drive here for church. And that got stupid real fast, and we decided that we would move here, and we sold our home, and we moved here, and we lived on Torrey Street. If we were drinkers, we could have crawled from Green Hall home, but we never had to do that. But it was there if we needed it. So anyway, so I hung out here for a while, and then I became a minister in San Marcos. Did about 3 years there. And then I went to Unity of North Houston, which, by the way, was the very first Unity church I ever went to, was Unity of North Houston. And it was such an amazing experience to be able to walk back into the room and, again, see lots of old faces from people that I knew from 1992 in 2000 and 2013. So it's a pleasure to get the chance to be back here. And you know, Linda said it's nice for things to be spontaneous and to notice that there are boo-boos, and those boo-boos happen when new folks come in trying to run the show. And one of the things that you discover, and it's great about being in a smaller church, is that those boo-boos are part of our spirituality. You see, because I don't know if you've noticed, but they happen every day in our lives. Something doesn't quite go the way it was supposed to go. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of somebody cutting you off in traffic. It happened to me this morning. It happens. And our ability to respond and relax into that spirit, that presence of God, which is here, whether the slides are mixed up or not. Granted, we love to have the slides in order because the singing needs to go in order, and it's kind of hard if you don't know the song. But it's still great just to feel the energy of people who are responding to the presence and to those mistakes and errors that happen in our lives. I'm going to talk a little bit today about some things that I've been learning since I retired from ministry. I retired from the pulpit in 2018. And since then, I've been a spiritual companion or a spiritual director. And right now, I'm studying to be a mindfulness meditation teacher to get a certification for that. I'm working with Jack Kornfield and Tara Brock and somewhere around 4,000 other people from around the world. 35 countries are studying this program. And as such, I'm getting in touch with a lot of Buddhist thought, a lot of Buddhist ideas. Now, when I was here before, some of you came to my classes when I was teaching about all the world religions. And there were people that asked me why on earth I'm teaching a class in Hinduism. Well, I want to offer a reason for that. So as we move into a whole lot of Buddhism that may show up in this, you may get an understanding about why I study Hinduism and Buddhism in addition to Christianity. In 1889, writing in the second issue of Modern Thought, which is now Unity Magazine, Charles Fillmore said, "The Christian religion has answered our needs up to the present age. But the evolution of spirit has created a demand for a religion of a broader scope. And we turn to the lore of India for lack of a better system nearer home." No. Don't tell Gary that I said we all ought to become Buddhists and Hindus and all that. All I'm saying is that Mr. Fillmore recognized the truth in the religions around the world, and that a lot of things that he learned from the Transcendentalists, including Emerson, were from the Far East, were from Eastern thought. In fact, Henry David Thoreau carried a copy of the Bhagavad Gita with him to the cabin on the lake, to the cabin on Walden Pond. So that's why we're going to listen to some of these folks, because it is in this understanding of other ways to God that many of us may find ourselves ever closer to the God of our understanding. Our life, we use candle analogy often for our life. Don't worry, I'm not going to do Hamlet and out, brief candle or any of that sort of thing for you, because that one's too depressing, especially in your 8th decade, as you begin to consider the briefness or the brevity of what we got going on here. But another thing I've studied is a long time ago, between helicopter flying and other things, I was a strength coach in the NFL, and I helped football players, as some of you may remember, when I speak to a younger audience, and I'll say Vinny Testaverde, and they'll say, "Who?" You know, they don't know who I'm talking about because, anyway, never mind. So I've been getting recertified as a coach and working on strength training. And so I've run across this guy named Jonathan Sullivan. And Sullivan is an incredible man, and he calls us athletes of aging. And I used to use that term back in the 80s and 90s to talk to people about the fact that we're all an athlete, and sometimes in our sport the only thing we carry is our brain. But the fact is that these bodies, that's all we got, and it carries this brain around. What happens when this light goes out, when this body is gone, is subject to some conjecture, and I'm open to anybody who's been there and come back to talk to us about it. In fact, Dorothy Pearson, an old-time Unity minister, told us that 2 days before Charles Fillmore died, he said, "Dorothy, I was wrong," because he thought that he was going to rejuvenate and live forever, and didn't quite work out that way. I'm not sure if it can, but at any rate, that's how that is. But I just want to read this brief idea from Jonathan Sullivan, because he says it way better than I can. You know, there's such a thing as candle clocks. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that. Go Google it, candle clocks, and you see candles that are designed to burn, and you can tell time based upon how that candle burns. And so he says a candle burns its fuel, its wax, and its wick, but it also burns time. It has burned. It is burning. and it will burn for some finite interval. The past is burned away, and the future remains to be burned. Burning, like being, happens now. As embodied time, we are more explicitly like a candle than a clock. We illuminate the world with our burning, with our being. Our shining being reveals the world. More on this. Your burning being illuminates a world that only you can reveal. And aside there, Charles Fillmore called that your individuality. That was the individual expression of God that each one of us is. That individual expression, the Christ essence that's in every one of us is individualized in each one of us. So that burning being illuminates a world that only you can reveal, a world that would quite regrettably, I'll dare say, never come to light without you. Your world. Each of us is a candle in the darkness. In this corner or that corner of a great dark city with an infinite number of rooms and roads and sights unseen, but for your brightening. The brightness of our burning is the brightness of our being, and the domain that we illuminate is the extent of the world we reveal. None of us can know how long that wick will burn. And none of us chooses which dark territories of the cosmos, which times and spaces we may illuminate. But we can, to some degree, choose how brightly to burn. And so how much of our world to reveal. And thus the potentials and possibilities available to us and to others. How can we burn more brightly? This is like asking us how to be more alive. Unlike the perennial, immortal adolescent, indestructible, with infinite possibilities, the authentic athlete of aging knows he's a candle clock burning with a finite future. What Shakespeare called the undiscovered country, I don't know any more than he did. Perhaps nothing happens. Perhaps something else. But certainly no more burning and being in this world. So what we're dealing with here in this light, in this life, is our opportunity. Is our opportunity to burn as brightly as possible and to shine that individuality into those nooks and crannies of the world. And you never know when it's going to happen. It may be how you say hello to somebody at the gas station. It may be how you hug somebody at church. It may be something you say at work just because it came to you to say it. But that all requires that we operate from our individuality, not just from some stifled personality. So what we're going to talk about is some methods and ideas about how to get this personality thing to kind of get out of the way a little bit. But I got to read one more thing, just because I said if I ever get to talk in church again, I'm going to read this poem. So bear with me. I haven't spoken in 2 years, so I've got a lot of stuff going on here. But Mary Oliver is one of my favorite poets. And she said, "Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper?" I mean, the grasshopper, the one who has flung herself out of the grass. the one who's eating sugar out of my hand. She's moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down. She's gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and flies away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? It's a choice. They're choices that we get to make. And part of it comes from knowing who we are. I have to say that again, it's who we are, because my wife grew up as a Baptist and she used to hear whose we are, and that kind of bothered her when she heard me say that this morning. What happened to us is a story that's told by Buddhists. It's a story that's told by a lot of folks. The story that the Buddhists tell us is of a Buddha that was covered in plaster or clay, and the guess is that it was somewhere around 500 AD when this statue was created. And so, as folks do in the modern world, they decided they needed to build a road. And in order to build the road, they had to move the Buddha. And when they went to move the Buddha fell. And there was a crack in the Buddha. And someone looked inside of the Buddha with a flashlight. At least in Thailand, it may have been a torch they'd talk about. Looked with a flashlight, and something shined back at them. And what they discovered was, behind the plaster was a golden Buddha. A golden Buddha. Now, we could talk about icons and worshiping icons, but the true story here is that ugly thing there, or not so attractive thing that lasted for thousands of years, was actually a very valuable golden Buddha. So when we think about ourselves, what are we covering up? How much of our light isn't shining because it's covered up with the effects of trauma, with all of the things that go on in our lives? And every time you think you've solved that trauma, let me just remind you that those things come right back up. When my wife's father passed away, his new wife, she refuses to call her stepmother, got all of her grandmother's china. And periodically, she'll remember and be traumatized all over again that Sadie got Big Mama's china. And every one of us have those little things that pop up, don't we? They pop up, and we're going to have some conversation about what to do. Now, our Buddhist friends also say, and this is from our Tibetan Buddhists, they say, "O nobly born, O you of glorious origins, remember your radiant true nature, the essence of mind. Trust it, return to it. It is home." That's just like when we say you're a child of God. It's the same place. It's part of that perennial philosophy, that part of every single religion. That is the religion of trust, and the religion that says that God is within us all and acting as us. Thomas Merton, Catholic monk. We were just talking about monasteries this morning. He was a Catholic monk who was kind of one of the most strict orders that you can have. Lived in silence all the time. The only time he spoke was when he said Mass. But he wrote prolifically. This is a story of when he was standing on a corner in Louisville, Kentucky. And he said, if only they could see themselves as they really are. If only we could see each other that way all the time. There would be no more war, no more hatred, no more cruelty, no more greed. I suppose the big problem is that we'd all fall down and worship each other, because when we realize and recognize the truth of our being, we always talk about that a lot, don't we? Recognize the truth of my being. Well, what about yours and yours and yours and yours? Your being is God. My relationship with you is a relationship with God each and every day. That opportunity to connect with God, and sometimes. And I shared a little bit about my brother-in-law as he passed away. He and I never touched, never shook hands, never hugged. Until we got to the end. We got to the end, and he would just reach out with shaking hands and just want to touch. We've all heard that story. Sometimes we want God with skin on it. And that's what Merton was talking about. Each one of us, we live in an illusion that we are alone, and that we are, certainly from our individual perspective, something special. But then again, we're all just part of the same old crowd. All this, the coat that you wear, whether it's black, brown, or whatever color the skin is just a coat that you put on when you're born. And yet we keep fussing. We keep fussing. And we keep having problems. So I want you to imagine for a minute. Imagine that, kind of acting like this is a gun. Let me put that down. Imagine your rich aunt left you a big house. Left you a mansion. The attorney, after reading the will, gives you the title to this property and this house. And you go to the house, drive up there and say, oh, man. You say, oh, man, I don't have any keys. Yeah, it's the attorney, where's the keys? But you got a house. You just don't have any keys yet. So you buy a tent, and you're living in the yard, cooking breakfast. You go from that 1-burner stove to a 2-burner to a 4-burner stove, and now you got a 2-bedroom tent outside of this mansion. Your friends come over, and you had to buy a ladder so that you could show them that personal gym up on the top. You know, you got that place, and then your library's over there, and you just keep showing your friends this house. And they said, well, when are we going to get in? I don't know. I don't have a key. And you know where this is going. Nobody tried the door. Nobody tried the door. Because the answer is it's there already. All we have to do is go inside. And indeed, that's what our Buddhist friends, our Hindu friends tell us, that it's the inside, it's where we're living on the inside that influences how we live on the outside. But you'd be happy when you got that 2-bedroom tent compared to the little tent. Excuse me. So, I have taught about Emily Cady's denials and affirmations I've studied about them for over 30 years. And I'm going to tell you, I have a little problem with them. You read those affirmations. You know, people say, well, you know, Emily said there is no evil. And we say there's only one power and one presence. But when I live in this world, and I look at someone who makes jokes as they deny the Holocaust, or wears a t-shirt that says 6 million wasn't enough. There's a part of me that looks in this world and says there's something really wrong. Whether we call it evil, whether that person is evil now, I just want to have another name for it. I don't want to say I'm just going to deny something's going on. Now, we could say they were born perfect. They were born children of God. They were not born sinners. They were not born evil. But something influenced them. Something influenced them. Just like you and I, we all have opportunities. So we can have a lot of philosophical arguments or discussions about these things. But how do I deal with that? That's where some of this living question, this practical Christianity comes from. And I'll just read one more, and that is, pain, sickness, poverty, old age, and death are not real, and they have no power over me. And I will tell you right now, if you look in my medicine cabinet, it is not the medicine cabinet of a 50-year-old. I guarantee you it's not the medicine cabinet of a 50-year-old. I will show you scars. I could show, they're just, stuff happens. Now, you got to remember, Emily Cahey went to medical school as a homeopathic physician, and they were still bleeding people. Now, in a sense, if you believe that when this is over, we simply pass through the veil and move on to something new, something better, then she's right. But what happens to us, a lot of us, I'll tell you a good example of it, is I decided that I need to top dress my yard. And some of you know what that means. It means I get topsoil, I get it delivered, and it's like takes up my whole darn 2-car driveway. I get a wheelbarrow, and I start shoveling. Now, it's springtime in San Antonio, which means it's about 1,000 degrees, and the humidity is unbelievable. And so I'm shoveling and moving, and then my wife comes out and says, you know it's supposed to rain tomorrow? Oh, so what happens is I'm denying old age. I'm just moving that. And then I realized that 70-year-old men don't do as well in the heat as 20-year-olds do. I was in bed for 2 days. Now, that old age didn't have anything to do with me being in bed. The way I acted and what I did had something to do with me being in bed. My goodness, I almost killed myself. But the yard got top dressed. And with all the rain we got, that's never mind. We'll talk about that another time. But the point I'm trying to make is that when we talk about what's real and what's not real, in school we had a lot of philosophical discussions about illusion. And we talked about illusions, and people that have followed Course in Miracles, they talk about everything's an illusion. But walk into that door without opening it. It's not an illusion. It's not an illusion. My brother-in-law got stomach cancer and died. His death was not an illusion. His death was not an illusion. But the experience of his death was a teaching opportunity. Where he went, what happened to him, I have no idea. But my awareness and understanding of what our opportunity is in denial has altered. Here's our affirmations. We won't go through the whole thing. But the big deal here for me is that I'm a child of God. I'm a manifestation of God. We've been talking about the image and likeness of God, the Imago Dei, since Augustine. And I believe that. I believe each one of us is born perfect. No matter what. We're born that way. And then what happens? That was a tease. Then what happens to us is that stuff happens, right? You hear your mother say something to your father. Now, my parents at night, I could hear them in their bedroom. We lived in a very tiny house. And I could hear them talking. That was their only chance to talk as adults. And I would hear them talking. And oh my God, I don't know how many times the topic of conversation was, I don't know about Donald Wine, because that's my name, is a single Donald Wine. And Donald Wine, I don't know what we're going to do. He got in trouble in school again. He wouldn't say the Lord's Prayer because the teacher made the Jewish boy say the Lord's Prayer, and he won't say the Lord's Prayer if the Jewish boy has to say the Lord's Prayer. So he got sent home from school. Next time he gets sent home from school, he's going to be suspended. What are we going to do? I heard that. And then I start hearing, so what I start hearing then is maybe I shouldn't take up for my Jewish friend. Maybe I should pay attention to the rules and the regulations more than people. Maybe I should behave differently to please my parents. So all of us had that stuff happen. We heard it, and we decided this is how I'm going to behave. This is how we developed our personality. We developed our personality in response to the lives we were living when we were children. And then we scratch our heads. Or we go to a year and a half of therapy, and the therapist says, it's all your parents' fault, go home. It feels that way. And by the way, they're still doing the same thing. I've got 4 kids from 43 to 32, and it's still my fault. A lot of it was. A lot of it was. But the thing is that I said, wait a minute, it wasn't my fault. It was my dad's fault. I went to therapy. I paid thousands of dollars, and we know that it was my father's fault. But that was my personality that developed in response to that. And what I'm learning is different ways to let go of some of that. Now, Linda and I are going to have a disagreement about using our imagination to tell things to go out the door. It'll come up in just a minute, Linda. Mindfulness, what's the big deal? Mindfulness is just paying attention, right? I mean, we've been told to pay attention since we were kids. Right there, there's a definition, state of being mindful, the state of paying attention. But here's where it really gets hard. Mindfulness is about having a non-judgmental awareness of our thoughts, emotions, and our experiences moment to moment. How many of you just saw that and said, well, that's easy? Yeah, that non-judgmental part is where the difficulty comes in. The guy that cut me off in traffic. Now, I'm getting way better than I used to. I used to have this whole horn ensemble that I would play, and I would give him directions with gestures and things. And I'm better than that now, especially since so many people are armed. But the point is that I get upset. So when that guy pulled out in front of me today, and I had to slam on my brakes, I said, you got mad. You tensed up. You had all this stuff going on. Now, one of the ways I can do with that is say, well, just stop it. Just stop it. Don't be mad. I don't know about you, but that doesn't work real well. And so the question then becomes is what tools can I use? And that's where the idea of R.A.I.N comes in. Darn. It has taken me a long time to get to the R.A.I.N part of this thing. Yeah, but we're here. We're here, and so the first thing I can do is recognize what's going on. In other words, just pay attention to it. I'm mad. I'm mad. Now, some of you may never get mad. Some of you may never get mad. Or some of you may get mad and nobody knows except you. That's where the mindfulness comes in. When you're feeling that anger showing up, it's not about whether or not you show it with the horns and the gestures. It's that it's there. And sometimes only you know. Now, I've been living with my wife now for over 20 years. And the best way for me to know that she's not happy is when she doesn't say a word. You hear words from me when I'm angry, and they last for about 4 minutes, maybe 5. But for her, it's quiet for hours and hours. It was acceptable as her personality got built for a girl to be quiet and mad. But a man could get loud and mad. By the way, I don't think it's acceptable for anybody to get loud and mad, but in my world from the 50s, unfortunately, it was okay. Now, the next thing we're going to do is just allow this to happen. I'm going to talk about the yelling and the screaming. I'm talking about the experience of the anger. Allow it. Now, when we talk about recognizing and allowing, we're not talking about where somebody is abusing you and you recognize the abuse and you're allowing the abuse. What we're talking about here is our recognition of the feelings, the emotions, the things that are coming up for us, and allowing them to be. For a lot of us, that's enough. That's what happened today when the guy pulls in front of me. I stepped on my brakes. He took off wherever it was, wherever he was going, very slowly below the speed limit, by the way, and I just allowed the experience of the anger to be. Because what happens with us, let's try something here. I want you to think about a time. Now, we're not talking about a trauma here. I want you to think about a time where you just got upset. Something upset you. Maybe the fact that the slides weren't in the right order just kind of bothered you. Just kind of close your eyes and feel that experience, just whatever it was. Could have been trying to come to church. Just feel that experience. Notice where you feel it. You could be tensing in your shoulders or your neck. Tension in your back. Could be your stomach is in some turmoil. So as you're having that experience, I want you to tell that experience, no. 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 How many of you had the experience go away? Some people are able to say, no, stop it. But what happens to me, and what happens to a lot of people I talk to, is that it closes down, reinforces the experience, rather than having the experience expand. I've had panic attacks and anxiety since I was 32 years old. Some people say it was because of my experiences in Vietnam. We have lots of explanations. For years, we had conversations about beating people up, slamming pillows, just doing all kinds of things to get rid of my anxiety. I studied with John Kabat-Zinn, mindfulness-based stress reduction, back in 1987. And those experiences persisted. Sometimes I would take medication to put me to sleep. I'd take alprazolam, Xanax, go to sleep. Everything's cool. When I wasn't flying helicopters, not subject to drugs, drug exams, I could use marijuana or something like that. Smoke a little marijuana, anxiety's gone, everything's cool. But I was still, they would come visit me. They would come. And I discovered R.A.I.N about 6 or 7 years ago. And Tara Brach tells a story. She talks about the Buddha sitting there getting ready to talk and kind of sitting there and just pontificating. And up comes this person that they call Mara. Now, Mara is the impersonation or the embodiment of greed, anger, all those things you just want to get rid of. And Mara would be out there around the outskirts kind of messing with people. And the Buddha's assistant, you'll say, hey, Mara's here. And Buddha would say, okay. And Buddha would go out and say, Mara, come to tea. And I said, oh my. I'm going to allow this terrible feeling to come and sit with me. And now when I start to feel anxious, I allow that anxiety to come and sit down with me. And when the anger is really there for a longer period of time, maybe I've been watching the news, I say, come here. Let's sit. What am I to learn? What do you have to offer me today? Because when I shut it down, it's like you're walking down a path and suddenly the path is overgrown with bushes and grass and the fog closes in. And what I need is an opening. I need a clearing. Because when I'm having a panic attack, I'm fixing to die. I'm getting ready to die. But when I say, come on and have a seat, be with me. Tell me what I'm supposed to learn. Boy, it sounds simple, doesn't it? Just come here. I'm suggesting we use our imagination to allow that bad feeling to sit down right next to me. And that's what happens. And this works pretty darn well with those things that are like the traffic jam or the slides or something like that. Just those first two, recognize and allow. Then the next one is that we're going to investigate. And now, when you hear investigate, what you got to know is that I have walls of books. I have over 4,000 books in my Kindle. And I've read almost every one of them trying to fix myself. Trying to fix myself by learning here. So when you investigate, some of you are going to say, oh, what book should I get? What book should I get? What group should I join? I'm sure there's a 12-step group for people who get angry in traffic. I'm sure that there's a group for me to go to. The point is that we all want to go up here. And it's here. And it's not just here where I love the guy that cut me off, because I'm not sure if I'm ready to go there yet. But one thing I can tell you for sure is that I love me. And I don't love me when this I am is angry and feeling bad. So what if it's all self-centered and all I want to do is feel good and avoid suffering? And so I avoid the suffering by recognizing, allowing, and I investigate that feeling by saying, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need in this very moment? Sometimes it's just words. It's all okay. It's all okay. When I left church, every time I've left a career, and I've had 4 or 5 of them, I left flying helicopters, and people would say, oh man, you're a helicopter pilot. And then they'd say, what do you do now? And I said, well, I'm a minister. And they say, oh, wow. And then, of course, then sometimes they say, because they don't want to say something unministerial to me, so I usually swear a few words so that they'll talk to me, and then we get along. But the point there is that when I left ministry, I had no identification. I didn't have a business card, that says who I am. And some of you who are retired may have gone through some of this. And so what happens when we get into the investigation is where I say, what's going on with you? What's going on, Don? How do you feel differently about not having a business card? How do you feel differently about not having a giant reason to get out of bed this morning? Or how could you maybe feel good by saying, dang, I get to sleep in? Isn't it great? But those are things that were difficult for me, but working through this helped. So I was able to go to that space that says, what do you need? I didn't need to go out and ask somebody for it or read about it. I knew. Each one of you, and I notice there's a lot of gray hair, and the gray hair that's not gray just might have had some help. And one thing I know for sure is if you've been hanging around as long as I have to get this, you got a lot of answers. And that's where the investigation comes in, because the answer comes. Just allow the answer to come. You don't got to chase it. You don't have to chase it. Oh, and this is it. There's a fuss going on among Buddhists. Imagine, Buddhists are just like Christians. You know, they don't like what's going on at this temple, so we're going to start a new one right over here. You know, people think that doesn't happen in Unity. There are Unities. There was 2 Unity churches in Kentucky. They were less than 5 miles apart. It happens all the time because we're fussing about what's right and what's wrong. So some people say this should be nurture, and other people say that this should be non-attachment. I thought we got non-attachment in the allowing part, so that's where I'm going to leave it. But nurturing means we're taking care of ourselves in this experience. So those of you who have experienced trauma know how difficult it may be to find somebody that can really nurture you in your recovery. We try it all the time. We try to hand it off. We try to write a check. When the nurturing, from my experience of watching a helicopter blow up in midair with 2 human beings in it, that nurturing, I couldn't get that from another man who was there, because we don't do that crap. I had to get it from me. I had to say, Don, what do you need when you wake up seeing that? Don, how do we take care of you? How do we take care of you? And that's me and my inner self, that true self, the golden Buddha that sneaks out every now and again. And my goal is that in the next decade and a half that I got before I died, that I'm counting on, I think, what we're trying to do is to let that light shine, or like Jonathan Sullivan Sullivan said, we're trying to let that light shine for everyone that will see the illumination that comes only from us, or that can only come from us. What a job we got. What a job we got. But it's what we're here for, is to be that light. Is to be that light. To remember that we're nobly born, that we're children of God. Whoops, we skipped it, I'm sorry. I was going to go back to the affirmation that we're children of God and heirs to the kingdom. We already have the keys. We don't have to camp outside. When we think about God, some of you, and Linda and I were talking just before service. I know people who say that they're atheists. And of course, one of the questions I'll ask when somebody wants to sit down and consider non-theistic or non-deistic spiritual companionship, I'll say, what kind of God, what is this thing that you don't believe in? And they'll start going through, I don't believe there's a God that does this or a God that does that. And I'll say, I don't either. Because they're responding and reacting to that God that helped build this part of their personality that they don't like. That idea of a God who was a Santa God that gave and took away. And that responded to prayer only if the prayers were the right language. And sometimes here in Unity we do that. I was in class one time where a person was expressing a belief in God that was pretty darn fundamentalist. And the teacher up at Unity Village said, "Are you sure you belong here?" And I believe everybody belongs here. Charles Fillmore didn't even believe that we should start this whole thing like this. The Self-Realization Fellowship from Swami Yogananda says you can study these principles and take them to your church. In fact, I find unity principles, if you go to visit with Father Richard Rohr and a room of 5,000 Catholics, they seem to be more like unity folk than like my experience of Catholics. But they still have a lot of those beliefs of God, and they'll have the God is everywhere and God is always present, and then God's gonna do this. So it's important for us to recognize that in this room there is an ecology of belief in God. This belief in God is all individual, and we evolve in our understanding of God. And one of the reasons I think we evolve is that God is the infinite. The paradox of what we're trying to do here is we're trying to understand the infinite with finite brains, with finite knowledge, finite awareness. And so when I said I disagree with Linda about the imagination and sending our problems out there instead of just sitting them next to me, remember that's my idea of how this might work. Well, it's actually smarter folks than me, Tara Brock and others. But we all have different paths, and that's what's important here. So when we begin this meditation, the meditation is from Psalms. And for me, this meditation it describes my personal evolution. My personal evolution of God, of that understanding. Today, it may change. So I'm going to say words, and I would like for you to say the words to yourself. You can keep saying them or just say them once. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. And so it is. I have a question. Do I have a vacation Bible school person in here? We have 1 or 2 minutes. I need somebody that can help lead a song. Okay. Do you know the song, This Little Light? How many of you know this song, This Little Light of Mine? If you ever went to Baptist Vacation Bible School, I know you heard this song. I think Methodists might have done it too. But we're just going to sing this just for a minute. Just one. You ready? Light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'll say that. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Shine the light to everyone. I'm gonna let it shine. Shine my light to everyone. I'm gonna let it shine. Shine my light to everyone. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. That's good. Children that were in the midst of learning about how to be quiet and cover themselves up like that plaster Buddha heard that song. And the cutest thing in the world was when they come home, a kid comes home and says, I learned to let my light shine. Of course, we told them to shine it somewhere else. But thank you.
On the water.